JS Cournoyer. I'm with Real Ventures, seed fund based out of Montreal. And so we have from the right, my right, Chris Albinson. So Chris is started as an entrepreneur, very successful in the in software telco days. Has had some experiences in Russia. We're glad he's back with us. He can tell you all about it later, but really crazy stuff. He's also the co-founder of the C100 with Anthony that you saw earlier. Canadian, believes in Canadian entrepreneurship. He's made some great investments with Panorama Capital, an investor in Tint, which is one of our, I would think one of the if you look at the next billion-dollar potential Canadian company, Tint is definitely in the top. I'm hoping we'll hear more about that. Also an investor in Federated Media, another great company run by John Battelle that I'm sure you've heard of. Then next to him we have Robert Simon. So Robert also is a successful entrepreneur. He started 5 companies. He made that comment to me at dinner yesterday saying that he sold one called PS Publishing to Lotus before I was born. So it gives you a sense of how long he's been around. So he also had stints at Sierra Ventures, which is a top quartile VC fund out of California, worked at Alta Partners as well, and he now has his own fund called Ariva Partners, out of which he does seed investing out of California. Then we have Chris. Chris is the work that Chris has been doing for years is starting to pay off. Chris has been doing VC in entrepreneurship in VC in Canada for a long time, and he's sort of become the image of Montreal around that sector. He's doing a great job everywhere he goes, so we're really happy to have him. Very involved in the C100, the CVCA, now CIX. Some of his investments include Airborne, Woo's World, Well.ca, which is one of the leading e-commerce companies in Canada. So we're happy to have him. And then Fred Destin. So Fred is French. Kidding. He's from Belgium. And he lives in Boston, has been investing for over 12 years. He's with Atlas Ventures, one of the top firms in the world doing VC work. He's done some great investments, including Dailymotion, which is the European version of YouTube. 250 million or so exit. I think you've had 250 exit in the past 12 months. Very successful investor out of Boston, here in Montreal because he has an interest in the market and actively looking at companies here. So the goal of this panel is twofold. So first, historically, I and Chris have been doing VC work for a long time in Montreal, and Americans have not been investing in Canada very much, and they haven't, even less in Quebec. And one of the topic is to get a sense of what are some of the things that the top tier VCs look for, and then it's switching it the other way around what our startups should look for in an investor. So let me start with Fred. So Fred, what does it take to raise money from an investor like you? What does the company need?
It's a fairly generic question, if I may say so.
Yes.
When we funded Dailymotion, we had 5 guys. The oldest one was 25, and they were in an office lent to them by the Amicale de la Martinique. And I tell you, no business sense at all. However, the beginning of viral metrics and an awesome product sense, and they got funded. And then we had Alex Chesterman at Zoopla, who's one of the co-founders of Love Film. He's a business machine and has a CTO that you can't present to your family, but is awesome. And he got funded at seed with £1 million simply on the back of who he was. And there is absolutely no rhyme or reason, frankly, as to what we will and will not fund. So I honestly don't have an answer. I have almost as many stories as companies that we have. One comment I would make, which is true for local, quote-unquote, local markets, and is that very often everybody wants their own company. And if you're in Montreal, the odds are against you. And instead of starting your own, partner up with awesome people and have a team of 3 or 4, and your likelihood of A, building a great business, B, getting funded and everything else suddenly become a lot better. So one of the lessons for smaller markets like ours is that, look around your community to make yourself stronger, and then you'll have a way better chance of being funded.
Robert, you want to add something?
It depends sort of on the sector. I'm a very early stage investor, seed investor, so I typically come in as an investor before the company has any revenue, before the company knows exactly what the product's going to be. So in that type of case, I like to be close, geographically close to the company. Now Chris is going to tell you about how they perform that exact role here, and then once the company has developed a product or some traction or something that I can understand, then you'll be able to attract investors from outside the geographic area. But ultimately, investors will go wherever there's a great opportunity. If you're a leader in a particular category and you're growing like crazy or you have traction, money's going to come towards you. So just build the best company, build the best product, and then the dollars and the investors will follow. We'll be begging, and then you'll be denying us the opportunity to invest.
So basically, what I'm hearing is that if you're alone, you should try to look for someone as a first step. Like a team approach is better, especially at the early stages, than by yourself. So basically, if you can't convince anyone else that your idea makes any sense, then you shouldn't be doing it. So what are some of the good teams that you've backed? If people are so important, like have you been in situations where you back a really good team into one story and then you ended up getting a success, but in a story that's completely different? Do you have an example of that, Chris? Oh yeah? Sure.
The teams work or don't work?
The teams work.
Which one are you asking?
Well, I'm starting with the teams that work.
Teams that work?
Yeah.
We don't have any of those. No, I think the biggest thing is an entrepreneur, and Brad alluded to this, but it's the absolute passion and commitment that you're going to build a massive fucking company, and no one else is going to have a company that's half as good as yours. And to Robert's point, is inspiring confidence in everybody that you meet. The whole idea of a startup, the idea of a startup is to believe in something that by definition almost nobody else believes, right? And if you don't believe it, nobody else will. It is a fine line, I have to say, between being an entrepreneur and being insane. And I have seen people step over it a couple of times. But I think it really comes out of conviction and passion about being the best. Building a world-class, kick-ass company. I want to build a billion-dollar company, not a $100 million company, not a $10 million company, a billion-dollar company. That's the core of it. And if you believe that, then you can get people to believe that, and they'll work with you, and you'll find investors get excited by that, and they'll give you money, right? You show up and say, I want to build a $10 million company? Not so interesting.
Yeah.
So, listen, I love that way of thinking. I think it works particularly well in the Valley. I think if you put the bar so fucking high that nobody has any idea to even project into it, it becomes very difficult, especially in local markets, to ever get going. So half of my portfolio in Europe, so Brad, by the way, I'm 4 out of 6, which are 3x plus at the moment, so there are ways to make money, but it is difficult. But if I look at Europe, we could build, so an investment strategy would be, I'll build a local champion, and it is deep enough that you can get yourself to 300. Now there are potential paths that take you beyond that, but many of my companies we could not project into $1 billion. Now the level of ambition may have been there, but we kind of espoused ignorance. What I wanted to see was a sort of a glimmer of greatness, that there was a path towards a great company. But almost to a certain extent, I don't necessarily like when people come out and say, hey, I'm going to build the next $1 billion company. It's almost, I will come to that conclusion, or we will come to that conclusion together as we're building a business. But I think why you don't have any. So it is also 30 years of evolutionary progress, right? So the PayPal mafia went off and did amazing things. The Skype mafia in Europe is going off and doing amazing things. You cannot build, Rome wasn't built in a day. And what resonated with me earlier was Brad saying, you need consistency and commitment. The guys who are second time around, or the guys who've lived through success, recycle money, get their company further than they can without taking VC money, and they start thinking that way and they can execute on it. It is a slightly value-centric thing to systematically, if you tell young entrepreneurs, if you're not in it for $1 billion, don't start, I would argue the opposite way. The only constant in our world is risk and uncertainty. So why on earth would you go work for a corporate instead of starting anything? And there is beauty in failure, even if you don't know if it's a billion opportunity. Why? Because you learn, you iterate, and then at some point, that maturity of looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, I'll build a fucking $1 billion company will come. But to put the bar so high on a 22-year-old coming out of university, there are some of them. We can build the entire ecosystem around that. I'm just trying to be pragmatic.
One of the problems that we have in Canada, that's for Europe because I don't know that market much, is the ambition of actually building a $1 billion company. Saying that I want to build and I'm going to build a $1 billion company is one thing. What type of means and how you're going to get there is another thing. And right now, talk about PayPal Mafia. Who knew that there's a fund out of Montreal that put $10 million in a little company called X.com? Does X.com ring a bell? That's the company that merged and took over the management of PayPal and created PayPal as big as it is, and as big as it became. So nobody ever leveraged those relationships. Nobody actually did anything with it other than little silos of communications and little silos of singularity, ambition going forward. And that's, I think, is what's missing in Canada, is that having the ambition is one thing, which we're just starting to see now with the recurrence of entrepreneurs. There's guys that exited 20, 30, 50, $100 million 5, 6, 8, 10 years ago that we're just seeing now come back to the market. They did their little angel investing left, right, and center, and actually investing is a job, so that didn't pan out as good or as profitably as they wanted. So now they're coming back and they're hungry and they want to build a $1 billion company. But we're there now.
Here's the problem, right? Here's the problem. If you don't have the $1 billion companies, your industry will fail and has failed, right? The reality is the Canadian venture capital industry, over the last 10 years, if you gave them $1, they would have given you less than $1 back over 10 years. Why? Because the companies, the big ideas were never run far enough, and there's lots of blame to go around.
Look, Chris,
but we have to have those aspirations.
That statement applies to the U.S. as well for the past 12 years.
But you want to say the dollar? You want to say how much of the dollar came back in the U.S. versus how much of the dollar came back in Canada?
I would argue that if you exclude the bubble, because most of the money that was made in the bubble was vapor money. I mean, it was made and then those companies disappeared. If you took out the bubble,
that's true, strictly speaking. If you look at the NASDAQ 100, it's not true.
If you take out the bubble and you take out like the top 10 firms.
Tangent. Okay, so
anyway.
in an effort to move on beyond this, I'll just try to translate. So what you're hearing from Brad and what you're hearing from Chris is have large aspirations. You can't set out on day one, I'm going to build $1 billion company.
Bullshit, you can build companies for niche markets better than big markets. And there are more exits happening.
Sounds like McClure. McClure, are you in the house?
Half hour and I'll prove you wrong.
The pirate is in the house.
A priori, in advance, you don't know which companies are going to be billion-dollar companies. That's why you go after large markets, so your company has the opportunity to be a big market, to be a big company, a billion-dollar company. And then Chris is saying, don't sell out too early. Perfect example is the Groupon case. In the folks that started Groupon, that was their second or third. They're repeat entrepreneurs. They grew like crazy. They executed well. But again, they had a prior experience, and then they had also the guts not to take whatever $6 billion offer and continue to ride for it. So when you're riding a winner,